Hi everyone, I'm Laura Nelkin. I'm a knitwear designer. I live in upstate New York in the Finger Lakes region, and this is clue 4, the final clue of Into the Hoods. Thank you so much for going on this epic hike with me. I can't believe we're finally at the end and our journey is about to be complete. I don't know about you, but sometimes when I go on a big long hike, I get to have a beer at the end of my hike. So when you finish this clue, you are welcome to treat yourself to something, whether it be a beer or a cup of tea or maybe a marshmallow you've been waiting to eat. Whatever it is, treat yourselves. So remember, with all of these clue videos, these are just tips and tricks and little things that I think that you're going to find helpful as you are knitting clue 4. All of you might be knitting different things. You might be knitting more than one version of Into the Hoods. There are 6 versions total, a balaclava and a dicky and a scarf version that are one color and the same that are 2 color. So this video is broken up into chapters. You can jump ahead and skip around based on which version you're working on at the moment and what part you want to watch. You do need the pattern to follow along, so make sure that you have that, and I will link to it below. This whole video will make no sense without the pattern in hand. So let's start with the balaclava version. This is going to be for both the 1 color and 2 color options. So whether you're working either of them, all the tips and tricks you'll need will be in this little section for you. So you were working broken rib in clue 3 on needle C, and you're going to continue on needle C, and you're going to be switching into what is basically half fisherman's rib. Some people call it shaker stitch. It's a really easy stitch that gives this really nice kind of dense, squishy fabric that I really love. I have a little single color version under the camera right here, and I'll show you how to work it. It flows really well from the broken rib into this, and I think you're going to have a nice time with that transition between the two. This is kind of like a funny side story, but my tech editor, when my tech editor was working on this pattern, she had no pictures. And when you work the fisherman's rib, the pattern says purl 1B, which means purl 1 below. But those of you who know, I love to work with beads, and sometimes I'll do a P1B for like place 1 bead or purl 1 with a bead, and that'll always be in the abbreviation. And I didn't have P1B in the abbreviations yet. And she was like, where are the beads, Laura? I don't know how to do the bead count. You don't have them on the supply list. She was like super confused. And I was like, no, totally different thing. This pattern has no beads. Sorry for the confusion. So I want to show you how to do that purl 1B, sorry, that P1B, which is purl 1 below. No beads. Sorry about that. So I'm on my needles right here, and the first thing you're going to be doing is doing 1 round with just a knitting round, and then the next round you're going to knit 1 P1B all the way around. So I'm starting with a knit, and then I'm bringing my yarn to the front of my work, and what I'm doing is coming into the stitch below the stitch on the left hand needle, wrapping my yarn around and pulling it through, and then bringing my yarn to the back of the work. And you can see what that does is bring up the stitch so that you get this nice kind of dense section of purls. So then I'm going to knit 1, and you're going to be continuing this all the way around. I love the way the broken rib and this half fisherman's rib work together and how they flow together from clue to clue. If you're working it with the 1 color, you'll just be working with your color all the way around. If you're working the 2 color, you'll be alternating 2 rows with the main color and 2 rows with the contrast color. You're going to want to work it until your entire cowl from where you did that cable cast on right underneath your chin is at least 11 inches long. If it's less than 11 inches, it could be about 10 inches and it'll be fine. Remember that your fabric is going to grow and get longer when you go to block it. But if you're wanting your balaclava to fold up inside the cowl to cover your mouth, you need it to be at least 11 inches to have it still cover your neck and cover your mouth and nose a little bit. If you're not wanting to do that fold up action, you can make this section a little bit shorter. If you're not sure how long you want it to be, you can always put your stitches on a piece of stitch saver, tie the ends together so your stitches don't come sliding off, and then try it on and see what you think. You can also stop and block if you want to really get a good idea of that length. If you think that your yarn is going to change a lot, be pre-blocked and post-blocked. Once you have finished and it is the length that you want it to be, you're going to finish with a final knit round. If you're working with 2 colors, that final knit round is going to be in the main color. And then I want you to work an Icelandic bind off or another semi-elastic bind off that you love. If you've never worked an Icelandic bind off, I do have a separate video that I'll link to below and is in the playlist. Just make sure to work that Icelandic bind off loosely. I find some people work their Icelandic bind off tightly because they're not working it all the way around the fullest circumference of their needle. So make sure you're wrapping your yarn all the way around the fullest circumference of your needle, and then that'll keep that Icelandic bind off nice and loose. It's a really lovely decorative bind off for the edge that's going to fold up and be covering your nose. So that is what I suggest to do for the balaclava. At the end of this video, I also talk about blocking and weaving in ends, and I also talk about adding an optional casing. So if that's interesting to you, once you are done working the balaclava, you might want to jump ahead to that. All right, those of you working the single color Dickey trail, I don't have much new to show you. What's happening with your single color Dickey is you're doing some increases to shape around your shoulders and neck. And at the same time, you are going to continue working with needle D until you get to the border, and you'll switch to needle C for that. When you get to the bind off, I suggest that you bind off with my favorite alternating bind off, which is basically switching between using a regular bind off and a lace bind off. I do have a separate video for how to work that bind off if you've never worked that bind off before, but what it does is give you a nice elastic edge, which you're going to want around the bottom of your Dickey so that your Dickey doesn't flip up on you. Pretty important to make sure that you don't bind off too tightly when you go to do the bottom of that Dickey. All of the videos I talk about that I'm not showing you things here are linked below, and they're also in the Into the Hoods playlist should you want to go and watch that. So once you have finished your single color Dickey and you've got it bound off, you might decide that you want to add an optional casing, and I go over that towards the end of this video. At the end of this video, I also talk a little bit about blocking and weaving in ends, so you might want to jump ahead to that. Okay, with the 2-color Dickey version, I don't have anything new to show you on the needles, but there are a few things I kind of want to talk out with you. What you're going to be doing is increasing so that your Dickey fits around your shoulders and sits under your jacket beautifully. You'll be working with your 2 colors as you've been doing before. There is a section after you work the border where I do some short row shaping on the back, where you'll be carrying the color that you're not working with along with you. That is written into the pattern, but if that doesn't make sense and you want to see it worked on the needles, I do show how to do that in the Clue 3 two-color scarf section. I'll probably try to give you a timestamp to that below so you don't have to go scrubbing through the Clue 3 video to find that. But that's where that technique is if you want to watch me doing it on the needles to understand that tidbit. And what's happening there is because you're working with two colors, you want to keep your other color moving with you as you're doing the short rows so it's not left behind and you don't end up with like a big float along the back of your work. So that's all written in. Definitely let me know if you have any questions about that. When you go to bind off your Dickey, I suggest that you use a semi-elastic bind off. I loved using my alternating bind off, which I also have a separate video for. You want to make sure that you don't bind off too tightly on that bound off edge so that your Dickey edge doesn't fly up on you as you're wearing it under your coat. You'll want to do that with needle B so that your needle is a little bit bigger and helps you ensure that you bind off loosely. Once you've done that, if you want to work a casing around the opening of your hood, I do have a section of this video that goes over that towards the end. And I also talk a little bit about blocking and weaving in ends. So jump ahead to that once you are ready for those steps. Okay, those of you working the single and two color versions of the hooded scarf, I don't have anything new to show you. What you're going to be doing is going to those held stitches that you held in Clue 3, sliding them back onto your needle B and working the second half of the scarf. All you're doing is working that first half of the scarf, but I've reversed the shaping for you. Back in the day, patterns used to be written like reverse shaping for second half of sweater, but I decided that would be a totally Dicky move if I did that to you. So it's all written out for you. Just follow everything. There's no new techniques that you haven't already tackled with Clue 3. I'm so excited to see your hooded scarves. So once you've finished that, you can decide to add a casing to your hooded scarf if you want to. I'm not sure if you will be doing that or not, but I talk about that in the next section. And then after that, I talk a bit about blocking and weaving in ends. So you can jump ahead to that if you want to watch that. Okay, once you have finished your balaclava, your Dickey, and your scarf, you do need to block them. Knitting does not look fabulous until it's blocked, and I highly suggest that you don't skip the step of blocking it. Some of you have been weaving in your ends as you go, and that is absolutely fine. If you haven't woven in your ends, I always love to weave in my ends before I go to block something. If you're worried about your ends weaving out, you can or worming out, you can weave them in and then not trim them until after you're done blocking and trim them after you've blocked, or you can weave them in and trim them and then go to block. When I go to block anything, I fill up my bathroom sink with some warm water. I make sure it's clean. I put in some wool wash. I have some soak or Euclid, unicorn wash, whatever you have on hand. And I make sure the water's not too hot and not too cold. And then I soak my knitted piece in there for at least a few minutes, 5 or 10 minutes, to make sure all your fibers are saturated. And then I take that hood, take my knitting out of the bath, drain the water. Don't shock it with any cold water or anything. Gently squeeze out excess water. I used to like to use a dry towel for that, a dry bath towel. Get all the extra water out of it. And then you're going to lay your hood out flat to dry. Some people like to lay out their hood with some rolled up towels to help them create the shape of the hood. I just laid mine flat. I know one of my friends, Susie, loves to use pool noodles in her cowls to make sure that there don't end up being any hard lines, but you can roll up towels to do that. You can use pool noodles, whatever you have on hand. I have a feeling you all will be posting pictures of your pieces blocking. When you go to do your scarf, I just laid that flat with the two sides of the scarf laying on top of each other. When your piece is dry, if you notice a line in it from it laying flat, if you didn't use a towel to kind of shape that out a little bit, I just use my steamer and steam out any ridge or line that has been created by folding it and laying it flat. So if you don't have a steamer, you can use an iron on the steam setting, but don't let it touch your knitting. Kind of hold it away from your knitting a little bit and just spray a little bit of steam on there. And that will help all of your stitches, kind of those lines that are created in there by blocking it flat, come out. So it'll be really fun to see how all of you block these things a little bit differently. For the Dickey, I laid mine down flat, and then I laid the hood down flat, and then any line that was at the shoulder, I just steamed that right out and it came out very easily. Knitting is very forgiving. It's easier than fabric when it comes to wrinkles, I find. So once you've done blocking your piece, try it on, and now's the time to decide if you think you want to add a casing to your hood or not. What that casing will do is give you a spot to put some I-cord in so that you can cinch up the hood around your face. Some of you might decide that you want that added width to your hood, and some of you might decide that it is not necessary. But I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do that next. All right, after you've blocked your hood, you might decide that you want to add the optional casing so that you can cinch your hood closed. I know I talked about this at the end of every chapter, but now I'm going to show you how to do it. This, I've written in the materials enough yarn to be able to do this optional casing. It uses about 50 yards of yarn. You can choose, if you're doing the 2-color, to work it with your MC or with your CC. That is completely up to you. I added in enough of both, so you should have enough and not have a problem choosing which one you want to use. This casing is very similar to the way that I added a casing onto a hoodola, but it is a little bit different, so I want to go over the steps with you. I do have a a finished Dickey version in the single color that I'm going to be showing you how to do it. But first, on this little mini hood that I had from Clue 2, I want to show you how to do the stitch pickup for the casing, because I know that this will be new to some of you, and I know not all of you love picking up stitches. You all know that I don't love picking up stitches, so I'm in the same boat with you. What's going to happen when you're picking up stitches is you're just going to pick them up along one leg of that outside stitch of the edging with the right side facing, and you want to pick them up and knit them through the back loop. So some of you might find that it's actually easier to pick up a few stitches with your needle, and I did this with needle C, and do that and get some stitches on your needle, and then go ahead, and I'm just going to get that other needle out of the way. That's not going to be there on yours. And you're going to go ahead and knit through the back loop, tightening up that picked up stitch. That's a pretty important stitch. That stitch that you've picked up is worked through the back loop so that you are twisting it as you work it. You can also do this as you work. Just pick up that stitch and work it through the back loop. It is up to you which you prefer to do. I think it's a little bit easier to get it onto your needle and then work it through the back loop. So you're going to be picking up stitches like that, one stitch in every stitch going along. And then when you get to the I-cord edge at the top right there, that I-cord that you did from the very beginning in the cast on of Clue 1, I suggest picking up 3 stitches in every 4 rows. So you'll like pick up 1, 2, 3 and knit them, and then skip a row, and then 3 and skip a row. You will notice in the pattern that I say to pick up around 94 stitches. It is okay if you pick up more stitches than that. It's okay if you pick up fewer stitches than that. The rate really is picking up 1 stitch in each stitch along the edge right there, and then 3 stitches in every 4 rows along the top. It doesn't matter if you end up with an even or odd number of stitches. This is an ish number, which some people love. That drives some people insane, but you're just picking up stitches all the way around the edge from the beginning of that cable cast on all the way around to the end of that cable cast on. And then you're going to go ahead and you're going to be working 11 more rows so that you have a little border of knit stitches on your needle ready to work the casing. And I'm about to pull out my single color Dickey that has this worked on it. So if you're somebody who doesn't like a spoiler, then don't go ahead and watch this section. Watch it once your hood is blocked and you're ready to do this. Okay, underneath my camera right here, I have my single color Dickey that I've knit. This one's I'm going to keep for myself. I love this sage green color. And you can see that I'm putting in the optional I-cord casing right here. And I have my 12 rows worked that are built off of those picked up stitches. And you can see those picked up stitches right there, right underneath each one. You can see that little twist where I did the picked up stitch. That is about to get covered by a really beautiful line of single crochet, like a crochet chain that's going to come right up the top of it. So if you were worried about that stitch pickup looking a little funky, don't worry about it. We're about to cover it up. So what you're going to do is you're going to be taking this casing that you built, those 12 rows, and folding it in half. And you've got your yarn right here that you didn't cut coming off of the last stitch. And this first stitch is kind of the funkiest one to do, and then you'll really get into the flow of working this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my crochet hook and I'm going to go underneath that twisted stitch right there, right into the hole. And then I'm going to come into the first stitch on the back needle purlwise, and I'm going to slide that stitch off the needle onto my hook. I'm using a hook that's a similar size to the needle that I used for doing the casing. And now I'm going to wrap my yarn around my hook, and I'm going to pull it through that stitch, and then I'm going to pull it through that hole. And now I've got one loop at the front of my work. And now I'm going to go in underneath that little X right there, that little twisted stitch. And then I'm going to go into the next stitch on my needle purlwise, slip it off, wrap my yarn around, pull it through, and pull it through. Your trick right here when you're working this is not to let things get too tight, but try to maintain an even tension. And I found when I was first learning to do this maneuver that I had to rip out and start once or twice till I was really happy with my crochet chain. And now I'm going to go in again underneath that little cross. I'm going to go ahead and slip that stitch purlwise off the needle. I'm going to wrap my yarn around. I'm going to pull it through, and I'm going to pull it through. And you can start to see that crochet chain formed. I'm going to do this underneath every cross stitch right there, and then purlwise, and then wrap my yarn around, pull it through, and pull it through. Just continuing to do that. And you're going to do that all the way across so that you've bound off all of your live stitches on your needle, and you end up with this really lovely chain coming up the edge of your hood. And if I flip this around to the back, you get an idea of what that looks like from the inside of your work when you're binding off those live stitches from your needle. So once you have worked that all the way around your hood, you can go ahead and thread an I-cord through this casing. I made I-cord with my I-cord tool. You can also make it with double pointed needles. You could use another kind of cordage if you want to for sliding through there, but just something to cinch things up. It's the easiest, I think, to use a big paper clip, sorry, not paper clip, safety pin to put your I-cord onto when you are feeding it all the way through that casing right there. So this is an optional step if you're somebody who thinks that they're, living in a colder climate, or they don't like their hood to be as open around their faces. I hope you all have had so much fun knitting Into the Hoods with me. Feel free to ask questions. We are going to have fit contests for finished Into the Hoods in the Ravelry and Facebook group, so go ahead and check those out for the deadline dates. If you are knitting on your Into the Hoods later, we are always happy to help you. Remember when you go to ask questions about Into the Hoods to tell me which version you're making so I know which part of the pattern to look at and help you. Thank you so much for knitting with me. This is my 14th annual mystery knit along. Every year I'm like, this was the most fun I've ever had doing a mystery knit along, and I really feel like that this year. I so appreciate the community that we've all created together. I love seeing you challenge yourselves on your needles and have a great time stash diving and knitting your hoods. So thank you so much for your support, and I can't wait till our next mystery knit along. Happy knitting.